All right, thank you. We'll move on to our next speaker, Dr. Jeffrey Sutton, who has both an MD and a Ph.D. He's a professor at the Baylor College of Medicine and the founding director of the Center for Space Medicine. He holds the Friedkin Chair for Research in Sensory System Integration and Space Medicine at Baylor College of Medicine. And he's chair of the board of the Translational Research Institute, which supports NASA's human research program. His career spans research, education, clinical care, and administration, and he's made many scientific contributions in the fields of smart medical systems, computational neuroscience, neuroimaging, and space science.
Well, good morning, and thank you very much, Ellen, for a nice introduction. So in this presentation, I'd like to tell you about 3 Texas-led entities that have brought successes and created new opportunities related to breakthroughs in space biomedical research, some related to the ISS. The organizations are the National Space Biomedical Research Institute, which I had the good fortune to direct for 16 years, the Center for Space Medicine at Baylor College of Medicine, and the Translational Research Institute for Space Health, which was actually on one of the charts that Julie showed in the previous presentation. So in the 1990s, with the space station program taking shape, NASA also launched an initiative to create new science institutes with the aim of fostering a higher caliber of scientific excellence in space research. And in particular, one of the institutes that was formed was the National Space Biomedical Research Institute, NSBRI. It was competitively awarded to a consortium of academic institutions led by Baylor College of Medicine and managed through a 20-year cooperative agreement with Johnson Space Center. The consortium was responsible for the governance of NSBRI, and you'll note in the chart that 3 out of 12 of the consortium institutions are from Texas: Baylor College of Medicine, Rice University, and Texas A&M University. The institute went 20 years, and it ended recently in September of 2017, as mandated by NASA and OMB. So the mission of NSBRI, as set forth by NASA, was twofold. It was to lead a national effort in space biomedical research to support the long-term human presence development and exploration of space, and it was to apply the resulting advances to enhance life on Earth. NSBRI operated largely as a virtual institute, and the value that it brought to NASA was evident in the accomplishments of its research teams. So in particular, NSBRI engaged a large coordinated network of top-tier biomedical investigators, many of whom were new to NASA. While the funding was only to the consortium institutions, by year 3, NSBRI was funding upwards of 60 institutions across the country at any given time, and Texas did very well. So over the years, NSBRI funded more than 20 different Texas universities, companies, and government labs. And investigators were organized into multidisciplinary distributed research teams aligned with principal biomedical risks identified by NASA, such as radiation effects. The next speaker, Dr. Ben Levine, was the team leader for the NSBRI cardiovascular alterations team, and he'll present some of his NSBRI-funded research as it pertains to high priority human health risks and ISS spaceflight. Over the years, NSBRI played a pathfinder role for NASA's bioastronautics program and then the human research program. For example, because of our in-house expertise with humanomics and studies looking at risks and individual susceptibilities and countermeasures, NSBRI was well positioned to help NASA in the development of the twin study that Julie talked about. We also utilized a user panel of current and former astronauts, flight surgeons, and flight directors to help ensure the operational need and feasibility of the research. So the corporate memory of this user panel was really extraordinary. It spanned 80 distinct missions and 4 spaceflight programs from Apollo, Skylab, Shuttle, and ISS. The user panels worked in advisory capacity to help accelerate operationally relevant research and deliverables to NASA. And actually, Greg Johnson is in the audience as the director of cases now, served on the user panel. We also had an effective industry forum for the acceleration of biomedical products with dual uses for space and Earth. And the education programs were a big part of NSBRI. The photo that's shown at the bottom right shows Tony Mikos, a TAMIS member at Rice University, with an NSBRI postdoctoral fellow in his laboratory. One of the most important achievements of NSBRI was that it demonstrated to NASA and other stakeholders the utility in having an external biomedical research institute. And to this end, we're very pleased that NASA decided to compete a follow-on institute to NSBRI, and I'll talk more about this later, but it did appear on one of Julie's charts, so it's very nice to follow, and it's a nice segue. There are a lot of connections between TAMIS and NSBRI, and so before talking about NSBRI accomplishments, I want to point out that TAMIS members served on the board of directors, the research teams, the external advisory council. Dr. Bobby Alford was chairman of the board for the entire duration of NSBRI, and he's the honorary program co-chair of this TAMIS conference, as you know. The picture on the right shows Dr. Alford and me presenting the 2012 NSBRI Pioneer Award to the Honorable Kay Bailey Hutchinson, who has contributed so much to our state and nation. She was a stalwart champion of NSBRI and, of course, is the honorary chair and co-founder of TAMIS. And several Nobel laureates, including Dr. Sam Ting at the table here, were also involved with NSBRI in a variety of capacities. So most NSBRI research was actually ground-based, but for example, the Institute worked with its investigators, JSC, KBR Wiley, based in Houston, to develop effective training procedures for ultrasound for use aboard ISS. As a physician at the time, ultrasound was not really used for a whole lot of things in the medical diagnostic realm here on Earth. NSBRI was supporting research in MRI, AMP-DEXA, and ultrasound approaches for medical imaging in harsh remote environments, including space. But ultrasound was the most feasible, and in addition to co-sponsorship of the first scientific paper ever submitted from space aboard ISS, NSBRI supported the cataloging of an ultrasound atlas of anatomy and physiology in space. The Earth-based applications that address the second part of NSBRI's mission are shown in the slide, along with a picture of an ultrasound guide book that was that's used in intensive care units that spun out of this work. The other image shows astronaut Leroy Chow, who is commander of ISS Expedition 10. He's demonstrating on his crewmate Salazar Sharapov how one might perform an ultrasound eye exam in space. Don't worry, the actual transducer that's used for eye exams is not this particular transducer, it's just a photo op. But upon his retirement from NASA, Leroy served 10 years as chairman of the NSBRI user panel. So keeping with the ultrasound theme, we were interested in the R&D of integrated sensor effector devices, including ultrasound for renal stone therapy. Astronauts, as you know, are at increased risk of developing renal stones associated with long-duration space missions. 14 U.S. astronauts have developed renal stones. The worldwide prevalence is increasing here on Earth. And NSBRI supported investigators to develop new methods for automated detection, localization, and sizing of stones. They also discovered ways to excite previously unrecognized gas that gets trapped during the formation of stones. So studies in animals and humans show that it was possible to use ultrasound pulses to move stones, and in some instances, guide small de novo stones or post-lithotripsy fragments out of the calyces to the point where they could be readily passed. Large stones in the renal pelvis could also be moved so that they would not obstruct a ureter. So the results of this work contributed to NASA decreasing the risk posture regarding renal stones on exploration class missions. This is really important, and we're very excited by this work, and not only for space because it's potentially transformative as a means of non-invasive surgery in clinical urology. So while it's not possible to adequately convey in this short period of time the depth and breadth of the accomplishments over the years, we did want to mention that the Institute supported fundamental and then applied research on blue light and its effect on behavior. Astronauts aboard the ISS are at increased risk of circadian disruption. There's a need to maintain high performance despite the loss of entrainment because of the sunrise and sunset that occur every 45 minutes. In low Earth orbit, the slam shifting, other factors. So it had been known that the intensity, duration, and timing of light exposure could be helpful in circadian rhythm management. But the effects of color, especially blue light, had not been well investigated. And NSBRI support investigators teamed with industry to develop blue-enriched fluorescent and then LED lighting that's made its way to ISS. The Earth-based applications are shown on this slide. Very importantly, and this is a theme that's come up repeatedly this morning, it regards education and outreach and the training of the next generation. And given that the Institute had matured to the point where so many top institutions and first-rate educators were involved, it was a natural evolution to develop a pipeline of training opportunities and programs to train the next generation of space biomedical scientists, engineers, physicians, and leaders. So the efforts in Texas provided the backbone for this endeavor. For instance, NSBRI worked with Texas A&M University to support a graduate education program in space life sciences. Aerospace medicine residents at UTMB benefited from an NSBRI-sponsored space medicine clinical research training program that provided mentored research opportunities for the next generation of NASA flight surgeons. The Institute also competitively awarded more than 50 postdoctoral fellows, and we've tracked these folks, and we're very pleased that 80% of them obtained jobs in academia, industry, or government related to human space exploration. In fact, some are now principal investigators on ISS flight studies or have positions that are directly or indirectly supportive of the ISS program. So along the lines of education, a spin-off and legacy achievement of NSBRI was the establishment 10 years ago of the Center for Space Medicine at Baylor College of Medicine. This is the first time that space medicine has been codified at the level of an academic center or department in any university or medical school. So there are currently 19 faculty members, and one of the first tasks was to develop a space medicine track for undergraduate medical students. And the electives are offered throughout the undergraduate years, and if students complete enough electives, they graduate from the track. We never imagined when we set this up that the electives would be so popular. In fact, some students tell us that they come to Baylor College of Medicine because they have opportunity to complete the track. More than 700 students have enrolled in space medicine electives for the past 3 years, and half of the first-year class at Baylor takes the Introduction to Space Medicine Exploration and Medicine elective. So the center has 2 cooperative agreements. One is with NASA for the Translational Research Institute for Space Health, or the TRI. This is the follow-on institute to NSBRI. I'll talk about this shortly. The second cooperative agreement is with the FAA for a Center of Excellence for Commercial Space Transportation. We have research and exploration medicine. One of our faculty members, John Clark, some of you may know, is a former NASA flight surgeon. He was the medical director of the Red Bull Stratus, wherein Felix Baumgartner jumped from 128,000 feet in a specially designed next-generation suit. So John has a special interest in crew survival and suit development because his wife, Laurel, was one of the STS-107 crew members who perished in the Columbia tragedy upon its return from ISS. In another Center for Space Medicine project, faculty and students are working together to 3D print components for the ISS medical kit. So I've mentioned TRI, and we're honored to have received this 6 and potentially 12-year large cooperative agreement from NASA, so thank you to our NASA colleagues. The mission of TRI, as you can see, is to lead a national effort in translating cutting-edge emerging terrestrial research into applied spaceflight human risk mitigation strategies for exploration missions. It's a mouthful, but it makes sense. The BCM-led team has major subcontractors in Caltech and MIT. And much like NSBRI, TRI has open solicitations for research nationally. So there are opportunities for Texas institutions and companies to be involved. TRI is really going to focus on high-risk, high-payoff approaches that are disruptive, that are not currently in NASA's portfolio for mitigating space biomedical risks. It's possible to utilize the ISS for TRI research, and this would be worked through NASA's Human Research Program. Other opportunities to be part of TRI include, but are not limited to, the postdoctoral fellowship program. So in conclusion, there's a wonderful progression of space biomedical opportunities, collaborations, and successes. NASA Johnson Space Center has been an excellent partner. We look forward to making further advances for years to come that are pertinent to the ISS, exploration class missions, and life here on Earth. Thank you very much.
Okay, looking for questions here. Yes, Buzz.
It was called SAS, Space Adaptation Syndrome. Do we have an answer for that now? There's space sickness.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Day or two.
Yeah. So there has been work that's been done on space adaptation syndrome over the years. The exact physiological mechanisms are not fully understood, although there are different theories. The posture stance is that there are countermeasures that are available that mitigate the risk to an acceptable level. Some are pharmacological, some of them involve training, and it's now seen as an acceptable risk at this point. And it is transient. It's an interesting syndrome because, folks who have had it in the past and are repeat flyers don't necessarily have it again, and vice versa. Some individuals who you might think would be at greater risk actually do fine, and vice versa. So that's basically the status on it at this point.
Do we have any other questions?
Oh, he wants to know what is it.
Space adaptation syndrome is a, sorry, I should have said, it's a syndrome that affects crews. Someone is saying seasickness here. It's not. Basically, what's happening is that there's a disturbance in your neurovestibular system that takes place when you go into space, and there's basically a disconnect between the sensory input that's coming in from your eyes and the fact that your otoliths are basically floating, and your semicircular canals have difficulty in determining which way is up, as it's been trained to do. And so this results in discomfort. It can result in nausea, some cases in vomiting.